Have you ever scrolled through Instagram and seen those luxury apartment tours with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and rent that costs more than most people's entire monthly salary? And you wonder how the hell someone your age is paying $3,000 a month to live there. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That sleek one-bedroom in the new high-rise, downtown with the rooftop pool and the concierge who probably earns more than you do. And here's what really keeps me up at night. The person living there probably makes the same salary you do, maybe even less, so what's actually going on here? How are regular people with regular jobs somehow affording rent payments that would have required a six-figure salary just 10 years ago? My name is Mike, and I've become obsessed with understanding how my generation is managing to live in apartments they technically can't afford. If you've ever wondered how your college friend is living in that luxury building while complaining about student loan payments, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're about to expose the entire system that makes this possible before we dive into the mechanics of how people are pulling this off. Let me paint you a picture of what we're actually dealing with here. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in major U.S. cities has exploded into territory that would have seemed completely insane just a decade ago. We're talking about monthly rent payments that exceed what people used to pay for mortgages on actual houses. And yet somehow millions of young professionals are signing lease agreements every month, moving into apartments that cost more than the median monthly income in their city. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most of these people aren't secretly trust fund kids hiding their wealth. They're not crypto millionaires or tech executives. They're teachers, nurses, marketing coordinators, sales associates, and entry-level professionals. Regular people with regular paychecks who somehow found a way to make the numbers work, or at least they think they did. The truth is, there's a whole ecosystem designed to make these impossible rent payments seem possible. And understanding how the system works isn't just about satisfying curiosity. It's about protecting yourself from making a housing decision that could financially cripple you for years. Let's start with the most obvious question. How much are we actually talking about here? Because when I tell people the average rent numbers in cities like New York, San Francisco, Boston, or Miami, they usually think I'm exaggerating. The average rent for a decent one-bedroom apartment in these cities now hovers between $2,500 and $3,500 per month. $3,500, that's not for a penthouse or some luxury suite. That's just for a regular apartment that a regular person is renting. But it gets worse when you start looking at the new construction buildings with amenities. These rents routinely exceed $4,000 per month, and it's not uncommon to see one-bedroom apartments going for $5,000 or even $6,000 every single month just for the right to live there. We're talking about annual housing costs that exceed $72,000 before you even buy groceries or pay for utilities. Now you might be thinking, well, Mike, maybe people are just making a lot more money these days. Maybe salaries have gone up enough to support these kinds of rents. And if that's what you're thinking, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's not what's happening at all. The median salary for young professionals has increased, sure, but nowhere near enough to justify these rent amounts using traditional financial wisdom. Financial experts have always recommended spending no more than 30% of your gross income on housing. Using that rule, someone paying $3,000 in rent should be earning at least $120,000 per year. But the reality is that most people living in these expensive apartments are earning between $50,000 and $75,000 annually. The math literally doesn't work, so how are they doing it? The answer lies in a combination of factors that have fundamentally changed how young people approach renting. And none of these factors are necessarily good news for the people signing these lease agreements. Strategy number one, let's talk about the most common strategy, which is cramming as many people as possible into apartments that weren't designed for that many residents. Remember when having a roommate meant splitting a two-bedroom apartment with one other person? Those days are as dead as the DVD player. Today's renters are getting incredibly creative with living arrangements. That luxury two-bedroom apartment with $5,000 monthly rent suddenly becomes affordable when you split it 4 ways. They're converting living rooms into bedrooms, using temporary walls, installing curtains as room dividers, and basically treating apartments like college dorms. I've seen 3-bedroom apartments housing 6 people with couples sharing bedrooms, singles taking the living room, and someone inevitably ending up in a converted dining nook. Suddenly, that $4,500 apartment becomes $750 per person, which looks reasonable on paper. But here's what most people don't think about when they're agreeing to these arrangements. They're sacrificing privacy space and sanity for the sake of living at a prestigious address. They'll have zero personal space, share one bathroom with 5 other people, and listen to their roommates. Zoom calls through paper-thin temporary walls, also they can say they live in the trendy neighborhood. The psychological toll of these cramped living situations is something nobody talks about. People develop what I call apartment rage, where tiny annoyances become major conflicts because there's literally nowhere to escape. Your roommate chewing too loudly becomes a federal offense when you're trying to work from your bedroom / office / entire living space. Strategy number 2. Second major factor, and this is the one nobody wants to admit, is parental financial support. There's this massive elephant in the room that everyone pretends doesn't exist. According to recent studies, nearly 45% of young adults aged 18 to 29 receive regular financial assistance from their parents for housing costs. We're not talking about help with a security deposit or moving costs. We're talking about parents who are literally paying part or all of their adult children's rent every single month. I've met 28-year-olds living in $3,500 apartments while earning $55,000, who casually mention that mom and dad cover half the rent. The fascinating part is how normalized this has become. People will post their luxury apartment on social media, showcase their independent lifestyle, and conveniently forget to mention that their parents are subsidizing $1,500 of their monthly rent. It's the financial version of using a filter on Instagram. Technically, you live there, but the reality is heavily edited. And look, I'm not judging people whose parents help them out. What bothers me is the dishonesty about it. When you're getting $1,000 or $2,000 a month from your parents, you're not actually affording that apartment your family is. This creates a completely distorted perception of what's financially possible for young professionals. The most concerning part is what happens when that parental support eventually stops. I've watched people in their early 30s panic when their parents retire or experience their own financial setbacks and suddenly can't subsidize rent anymore. These people have built their entire lifestyle around an income level they never actually achieved. Strategy number 3, there's the side hustle economy, which has become the financial duct tape holding together impossible rent payments. People aren't just working one job anymore, they're working 2, 3, or sometimes 4 income streams simultaneously. Someone might have their main career job that pays $60,000 a year, but then they're also driving for Uber on weekends, freelancing at night, selling stuff on Etsy, and renting out their parking spot for extra cash. They've essentially turned themselves into a human LLC with multiple revenue streams all feeding into that monthly rent payment. I've met people who spend 60 to 70 hours per week working just to afford an apartment they barely spend time in because they're always working. It's like a bizarre form of housing indentured servitude, where your apartment becomes both your biggest expense and the reason you can never actually enjoy life. The mental gymnastics people perform to justify this are fascinating. They'll say things like, "I'm building my empire," or "I'm hustling now so I can relax later." But the reality is they're burning themselves out in their 20s and 30s to live in an apartment that's draining every ounce of their energy and free time. Some people are even more creative. They're subletting their apartments on Airbnb while they couch surf or stay with friends, essentially becoming homeless in the apartment. They're renting so they can afford to rent it. Let that sink in for a second. They're paying $3,000 a month for an apartment they don't actually live in, they just rent it to other people to cover their costs. Strategy number 4, perhaps the most dangerous trend I've seen, is how people are using credit cards to bridge the gap between their income and their housing costs. This is where things get really scary from a financial planning perspective. People will pay their rent on time, but then put literally everything else. Groceries, utilities, transportation, entertainment, all on credit cards. They're essentially using high-interest debt to subsidize a lifestyle they can't afford. It's like using a flamethrower to light a birthday candle. Technically it works, but it's probably not the smartest approach. I've talked to people who are carrying $20,000 to $30,000 in credit card debt just from daily living expenses while living in luxury apartments. They're paying 18% to 24% interest on groceries they ate 6 months ago, all because they committed to a rent payment that consumed 50% to 60% of their take-home pay. The math on this is absolutely terrifying. Someone paying $3,000 in rent while earning $70,000 annually is spending over 50% of their gross income on housing alone. After taxes, they might take home $4,000 per month. After rent, they have $1,000 left for literally everything else in life. That's when the credit cards come out. Then there's the signing bonus cycle that's becoming increasingly common. People take new jobs specifically for the signing bonus, using that lump sum to cover several months of rent upfront. They're essentially pre-spending future earnings to maintain their current lifestyle. It's borrowing from their future self to fund their present housing fantasy. Let's take a typical scenario and run the real numbers that most people never bother to calculate. Imagine someone making $65,000 per year living in a $3,000 per month apartment. After taxes, they're probably taking home around $4,000 monthly. They're spending 75% of their take-home pay on rent alone. That leaves $1,000 for utilities, food, transportation, insurance, student loans, savings, retirement, and literally everything else. It's not just mathematically impossible, it's financially suicidal. But people convince themselves it's worth it because of location, because of amenities, because of the lifestyle. They're essentially paying $36,000 per year for the privilege of having an address that impresses people. Over a typical 2-year lease, that's $72,000 spent on housing. For comparison, if someone had taken that same money and invested it in a simple index fund, they could have built actual wealth, instead of just funding their landlord's retirement. The most depressing part is what this does to people's long-term financial health. They're in their prime earning years, their 20s and 30s, when compound interest could be working magic on their retirement accounts, but instead they're funneling every dollar into rent payments that build zero equity and create zero wealth. I've watched people hit their mid-30s with impressive LinkedIn profiles, cool apartment histories on their Instagram, and absolutely nothing in their savings accounts. They've spent a decade paying premium rent, living paycheck to paycheck, and building someone else's real estate empire while sabotaging their own financial future. The psychological component of this is what really fascinates me. Once someone commits to living in one of these expensive apartments, they develop what I call luxury apartment Stockholm syndrome. They become emotionally attached to their financial captor. The apartment isn't just housing anymore, it's a reflection of their identity, their success, their social status. The idea of moving to something cheaper feels like admitting failure or accepting a lower position in life. They'll defend their rent payment with the same passion they'd defend a family member. This emotional attachment makes rational financial analysis nearly impossible. When someone suggests they could save $1,500 per month by moving to a less trendy neighborhood, they don't hear a practical financial strategy, they hear an attack on their self-worth and their right to enjoy life. The real estate and apartment industries understand this psychology better than most people understand themselves. They've spent billions researching exactly how to trigger these emotional responses and convert them into signed leases. Walk into any luxury apartment leasing office and notice. They don't talk about cost per square foot or long-term financial impact. Instead, they focus on lifestyle, amenity access, and social status. The sales process has been refined to overcome every rational objection. Worried about the cost? Well, look at this rooftop pool. Concerned about the commute? But imagine the Instagram photos. Nervous about affording it? Don't worry, everyone here makes it work. So there you have it. The mystery of how people are affording these insane rent payments isn't really a mystery at all. It's a carefully orchestrated system of roommate cramming, parental subsidies, side hustle, slavery, and credit card dependency that would make a financial advisor weep. People aren't actually affording these apartments in any meaningful sense. They're just juggling multiple income streams, sacrificing their sanity, and going into debt, while convincing themselves they deserve to live at that address. The next time you see someone posting their luxury apartment tour on social media, remember they're probably eating ramen in that beautiful kitchen to afford it. And maybe that modest apartment in the less trendy neighborhood doesn't look so bad after all. If this video helped explain the madness behind modern rent payments, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because next week we're diving into how people are affording those $8 lattes every day while claiming they're broke. Trust me, that one's even more wild.